Today I have Steve Dann here with me. Steve, how you doing?
Very good. Thanks, Austin. Good to be with you today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming on the Conley show. I reached out to Steve, one, because I kind of wanted to reach out to someone who is from a different walk of life. And Steve, what is it that you do? Reading your profile, from the sounds of it, is you own your own company, yes?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. I do like to interview a number of business owners because I like to consider myself an entrepreneur. But what intrigued me most about Steve is that he started up a company that, from my understanding, is virtual reality based.
That's absolutely correct, Austin.
Yeah, so explain to us what it is you started up, how you got into it, and we'll go from there. I have a couple of questions for us, but it's just going to be a casual conversation talking back and forth. We don't have to stick to the script.
Sure, that'd be great. Yeah, I start off where really how I sort of got into business in the first place. I originally was in film and television, working in special effects and new technology, and working on that for quite a long time. And then I actually sort of segued into app development, and through app development, about 13 years ago, I discovered a new sort of medium called augmented reality. And then around about 2012, a chap called Palmer Luckey sort of reinvented something called virtual reality.
Yeah.
And they're not the same, but they're very close. So they're what I call two sides of the same coin. They're different sides of the same coin. And really, the sort of we started off sort of working with lots of different companies, sort of helping them find solutions in augmented reality and in virtual reality.
Now,
But I
what's
was,
the difference between the two? Between
uh,
augmented.
yeah, the difference between the two is in virtual reality, I ask you to put on a visual headset, and then you can't see anything else. You can only see what you can see inside that virtual headset. So I'm transporting you into a different reality, as it were.
Yeah.
Augmented reality is really where I can actually sort of ask you to put on a Microsoft HoloLens, for instance. That's a visor you put on, but you can actually see through it. And then I overlay things on that. And by overlaying it, we trick the brain into thinking that the overlays appear in the real world. So it's a combination of, it's sometimes now called mixed reality. So you're seeing partly the real life as it's happening, but also you're actually sort of seeing something overlaid, or in actual fact now something that happens with inside your vision, and it looks as though it actually appears in there and lives in there. Um,
So I don't know if you're probably not familiar with American football. It recently just started up.
oh, I
And
love
the
American football. Don't
Carolina
worry.
the Carolina Panthers before the game had this panther that was running around the stadium. It wasn't real. It was what I thought virtual reality, but technically was that augmented reality?
That's probably augmented reality.
Okay.
And in actual fact, back in the day, this goes from the crossover from television into sort of other mediums now. American football was one of the very first sort of sectors to use augmented reality when they were using the lines across the pitch to help people understand how far that you had to go with inside the 10 yards.
Right.
That was the very first use of augmented reality in television.
Yeah, the
Uh,
young line.
yeah, and of course now it's a sort of it's actually sort of with the advent of technologies as it goes, you could have augmented reality on your smartphone,
Yeah,
or
I
you.
have the Oculus 2 sitting next to me.
Oh, great! That yeah, and that's the Oculus 2 is virtual reality. It's
Right.
it's a Quest 2, and the sort of the augmented reality is, as I say, when you sort of you can be wandering around and sort of you might actually want to see something through. Well, actually, I don't know if you've ever played Pokemon Go, because you can
I
play.
have not actually, but a lot of people did.
Yeah, because you could play Pokemon Go now in augmented reality. And when that first sort of came out, it was really successful and also really annoying to people, because you could find virtual Pokemon Go figures dotted around various towns and cities around the world. And so, of course, people were running around to specific locations to try and capture these virtual Pokemon figures. And so
Yeah,
you had sort of, I know there was one sort of big event in Central Park in New York, and tens of thousands of people turned up to
I
that.
saw people in a mall. There was a big gathering in the mall one day, and I asked, "What are you guys here for?" And they said, "Oh, we're all getting together to play Pokemon Go."
Exactly, exactly. And so they play that actually sort of viewing things through their smartphones. It's created by an American company called Niantic, who's very much at the forefront of what's happening in augmented reality. And as I say, now it's progressed now that Microsoft and another company called Magic Leap, and there are other companies around, but those two companies produced actually very wearable sort of visors that actually enabled you to actually sort of hands-free see what was happening in augmented reality. As I say, with virtual reality and the Quest 2 that you've got there, once you put that on your head, you're totally enveloped. You can't see anything else. And
Right.
one of the reasons that we don't exclusively sort of use virtual reality, but that's a main part of our thrust. One of my companies that I have now is called Medical Realities. And we use virtual reality to train and educate doctors and surgeons and medical students and nurses. So it's a yeah with the headset. So it's a great way of people being able to sort of train. Usually sort of traditionally sort of a student or a doctor was either at a lecture, or they were crowded around a patient's bed, or they were actually in an operating theatre seeing how other people did operations. Now we can actually sort of capture those or create those in virtual reality, and they can be then that can be seen by people around the world. Before, it was very much a sort of almost a one-to-one training session. Now we can capture it, and we can actually sort of put it out around the world. In fact, one of our live sessions that we did actually had 55,000 people around the world watching a particular operation taking place.
Live?
So live, yeah. So and it was a training operation, and we had people sort of so all over the world, every continent in the world. I think 142 different countries. So that's really what sort of spurred us on with in the medical sector to actually start to sort of create more and more training modules. Originally, they were for medical students, but then we found out, of course, that that doctors and surgeons and dentists and nurses, once they've graduated, they actually have to keep on training throughout their career. So
Right.
in actual fact, we create not only training modules for students, but training modules for people throughout their careers as well, to help them stay up to date with the latest techniques, for instance.
How did you come up with this idea to start this business?
It was very good. As I say, I was working with sort of blue chip companies, sort of to do solutions in augmented reality and virtual reality. But I was very lucky to actually sort of meet at Google campus here in London a very well-known cancer surgeon who was also very much into tech, and we started talking about how new technologies like AR and VR could in actual fact help in the medical sector. And really, that he's my co-founder in Medical Realities, Professor Shafi Ahmed. And we've actually, that was 6 years ago now, and we've progressed a long way in those 6 years.
Yeah. No, that I don't even know how like that's an excellent idea. It can really help because when I put on the headset, the Oculus Quest 2, let me tell you something. I let out the biggest whoa because I've never experienced anything like that before. But and then when you're looking at your virtual hands and you're going like this and the fingers are moving, I took off the headset and it made me question like, is this real?
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to manipulate the human mind into thinking that the virtual reality experience is what you're actually experiencing.
Uh, Absolutely. And in actual fact, that our strongest sense is our sense of vision. and the brain sort of computes that in a very special way. So it trumps basically everything else. So what happens is that once you're in virtual reality, if we as developers have done the right thing, within a very short space of time, your brain will start to think that whatever reality we put you in is the real reality.
Yeah.
And that reality, as I say, we can do training, but also we could transport you to a different continent or a different place. And perhaps in the future, we can transport you to space stations or to far off planets as well.
Yeah, no, so first thing is there's actually a problem with the video game aspect of it. I get very queasy or dizzy after like 10 minutes, and I was reading about why. It's because the brain thinks you should be moving, like when you're walking in the virtual reality, and the fact that you're not, it's going to create motion sickness. Uh, Secondly, they do have like an International Space Station game. They do have, I downloaded National Geographic. I was hanging out with penguins. Like it was so cool. And for people who are, it's expensive. It definitely is expensive. I had to drop a couple $100, but to me, I thought it was worth it. Now I don't use it all the time, but it just blows my mind how far video games have come. And is this what we should expect in the future for video game wise? Like not just steering away from maybe consoles, but going to the virtual reality, augmented reality aspect?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think sort of what I call traditional video gaming will always be there, but I think more and more we'll see over the coming years people sort of becoming more immersed in the games that they're playing, but as you say, by either augmented reality or virtual reality. And it's interesting you say that you suffered, you feel a little bit sort of nauseous when playing games and things like that. It's something that we battled in right from the get-go, and it's partly to do, you're exactly right, with sort of the actual sort of lag between what you're seeing and what your brain thinks it should be seeing. And if you think you should be moving, your brain thinks you should be moving and you're not, then that causes a confusion in your mind as well. So we spend an awful lot of time trying to create what we do, so it actually, in actual fact, it doesn't give you any of those unnerving feelings or feelings of not being in total control of what you're doing. And over the years, we discovered certain tricks on how to do that. But really and truly, a lot of it's down to how well and how fast the technology sort of pushes forward, because the Oculus Quest is a huge sort of step forward from the original VR headsets. And as I said, that sort of 2012, what happened with Palmer Luckey was he reinvented virtual reality, and because virtual reality had actually started off around about 1960 originally. Yeah. So it's one of those sort of overnight things that's had a long sort of way of coming. But he was the first person to actually sort of figure out that you could, in actual fact, take a lot of the technology that was then coming into smartphones, such as gyroscopic movement and movement left and right, and your phone knows exactly where it is in space, and actually utilize that in actually making an affordable VR headset. Because you say like $299 for a Quest 2 is a lot of money, but before 2012, you could expect to pay up to $22,000 or $25,000 for a headset. So it's actually, in 10 or 12 years, it's actually sort of come down a lot in price. And also it's got an awful lot better, because every time people bring out new chipsets and new things, Qualcomm is very much at the sort of forefront of doing this. It actually makes the experience better, and also it makes what we can do better as well, because there are things that we can't do now that we will be able to do in the future.
Yeah. One of the things I do to battle the motion sickness, and it might sound silly, is I actually, if I'm walking, I walk in place. Yep. So that kind of almost tricks myself into thinking that I'm moving. Now, for the medical training, what is it exactly? Is it like they're performing operations? And is it actually like hands-on where they're doing it? And how realistic is that?
Well, basically, we use two ways to do it. We actually sort of film operations using special cameras that film everything in 360 degrees. And then we overlay a lot of other information. Because the more you actually sort of interact with what's going on, the more you learn about what's going on, the more it sticks in your mind. And using virtual reality for training and education is fantastic because it's a sort of, it helps you remember exactly what you're being taught or exactly what you see. So on the one hand, we've got what we call our 360 filming, but then we add lots of overlays, and you can jump back and forth between those overlays. It's really the start of what's called spatial computing, and spatial computing is where, in actual fact, your computers and your computer screens aren't big enough right now to take all the things that you could have open at one time. And in actual fact, that there are some things you can actually get for the Oculus Quest, where you can put lots of screens around you in 360. So instead of just having one screen with lots of tabs, sort of like you can flip back and forth, hey, you can have a screen for every tab and look around and then sort of select that one and go to it straight away. So that's one side of what we do. And the other side of what we do is that we utilize the 360 filming because we want people to understand how the best people, whether it's the best nurses or the best doctors or the best surgeons, would actually train their students or their peers. And so people can actually see that in 360. They can interact and actually ask a lot more information rather than just watching a 2D video screen in front of them. And we ally that with being able to go into what we call simulation mode, and that's using CGI models, which are 3D CGI simulation models that you can start to interact with, so that you can actually sort of take out, you can put your hand in and you can actually touch the virtual patient in front of you and things like that, or you could cut the virtual patient, or you could inject the virtual patient. So those are the sort of, it's quite a wide range of what we do, from what we call the sort of simpler 360-degree videos, which capture actual operations or actual teaching modes that are actually being given. And that's very important because up until now, when that was done traditionally, it was great, but you could only sort of teach a few people at a time, sometimes only 2 people maximum. And also once the operation or once the demonstration had finished, that as an asset had disappeared into the ether. Whereas now, by capturing it on 360-degree video, we can actually not only augment what we've got there to make it more interesting and make it more viable for training and education, but it's a resource that can be used over and over again and accessed for people all around the world, not just in the one particular room where it actually happened.
Has this technology made it to the States, or are you just UK based right now?
No, we're UK based, but in actual fact is relevant all around the world. When we first started doing it, we weren't sure. Obviously, the inside the UK, there's a thing called the National Health Service, which is a free to all service, health service for everybody, which is great. So, and that means that it's very centralized, so that we can, in actual fact, get access to lots of hospitals. So all the hospitals inside the UK are under one heading. They're not sort of split up like they are in America. And that's been very useful for us going forward. But we weren't sure whether the actual training that was happening here in the UK would be applicable in America as well, or in the States, or in France, or in Australia. And we've happily found out that in actual fact, they actually mesh completely. So the training that happens over here in the UK is super relevant to what happens in America or Australia or in China, for instance.
Right. One of the things I wanted to ask while I'm thinking about it is, so you got sights and sounds covered, and immersive video, we're almost like you could look behind you, you could look all around the room.
That's it.
Do you think that they're going to ever add different senses to it? Like, for example, smell or touch, like where you can actually, when you're interacting with it, you could feel. Is that something that might happen in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think all the five senses are all be heightened inside virtual reality and augmented reality. One of the ways that we actually sort of we find very useful, and one of the things that actually helps people sort of combat any feeling of nausea is, in actual fact, through audio. So we use sort of 360-degree audio, so that, for instance, if I've got you in 360 and you're looking at something in front of you, but in actual fact, myself as a teacher or as a programmer of what I want you to be seeing, I'll put a noise behind you. But it could be somebody saying, "Hey, look at what I've got," and
Yeah.
it sounds like it's coming from behind you, so you automatically turn around to
Right.
see what's there. So that's very important to actually sort of underline and giving people a really great experience in virtual reality. And certainly touch is the next thing that comes along. Although it's interesting, we talked about how the brain can be tricked sort of because visuals sort of oversee absolutely everything.
Yeah.
For instance, with touch, you've got a certain amount of feedback and touch feelings with the controllers you get, for instance, with the Oculus Quest, but it's not what I call sort of being able to sort of pick up a needle and a piece of thread and being able to thread it through. You can do that visually, but to get the exact feelings of sensations of picking up a metal needle or picking up a thread, and then being able to be dexterous enough to be able to thread that needle, is quite difficult. But it turns out that the brain can fool your sense of touch. So in actual fact, it doesn't always have to be extremely what we call haptic sensitive. The brain will actually fill in a lot of the details. For instance, I could sort of reach out and grab something in 3 dimensions, and it will look to me that I'm actually sort of holding. Let's say it was a phone, and I could reach out and grab the phone like that, and it looks like that's what I'm doing. But in actual fact, what I'm really doing is that, but what I'm seeing visually is that. So that's the sort of that's the touch aspect of it. And yeah, that's one of the I was going to say the final one, not quite the final one. Smell is obviously important as well, because you remember smells for life. It's funny how sort of smells like music and things like that can trigger off emotions or remember something from the past. There are people working on headsets that have the ability to actually add smells to your experience as well. The one thing that I think is going to be the most difficult is obviously taste, but
Right.
because that's the last sensation. But even now, I know that people are working on that and trying to find something that you can put into your. At the moment, it's something that you put into your mouth. It's an electrode that you put into your mouth, which actually can give you the sensation of taste.
Yeah.
So it will happen at some point in the future. It's happening now, but it's very rudimentary.
Yeah. So also too, I think taste can be tricked in the sense of you smell something, you almost can taste it.
Yes.
Um, yeah. So that type of technology might come out. We've covered video games, we've covered medical training, but one of the things that intrigues me so much about virtual reality and augmented reality is the benefits that the military can get from it, police can get from it, firefighters. Is there anything like that going on? Almost like how they have programs for surgeons to train?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's really not a sector that you can think of that isn't going to be affected by this type of technology in the future. And obviously, the sort of the that one of the things that we started off because we saw a use case with inside medicine, but I know people over here in the UK and people over in America are working with firefighters and paramedics, for instance, because it means that you can train people out of what I call harm's way, and it's the same for the army. So you don't actually have to go on an assault course. You don't actually have to go out to a car crash, or you don't have to go out to a sort of burning building to actually sort of get that experience, or to get that understanding of in actual fact how to control what you're seeing. So it's so this is going to be a great way of, in actual fact, sort of putting people in what would normally be very, very dangerous situations. I've seen people sort of trying it out to say, right, for nuclear reactors, where there's problems with nuclear reactors. Now, obviously, people have to understand when something goes drastically wrong with the nuclear reactor, it can be very dangerous for people to try and actually sort of correct what's going on, especially if they've got to go into the core of the reactor. Now, they can actually practice doing that in virtual reality. They don't have to go anywhere near a reactor.
I didn't even think of that.
Until they absolutely have to. So it's a great way of, in actual fact, sort of trying something which is either impossible. I mean, we talked a little bit about what's happening in space, so that you can actually, it will help people, astronauts train how to do spacewalks and things like that, but also how to do how to fix spacecraft actually in situ, because you can make them feel as though they're in a weightless situation. And in actual fact, there are two areas where you don't usually get sort of motion sickness, and that's when you're in a space simulation because you're floating, and the other one is when you're under the sea when you're floating, because your mind is going, hey, I'm floating, I can actually float anywhere, I can float in this direction or that direction, it doesn't really matter, I don't have to walk anywhere. So that's why actually some of the best VR simulations that I've seen have taken place either in space, in weightless conditions, or in the sea, under the sea, where you're also weightless as well.
So you co-founded, what was the company called again?
It's Medical Realities.
Medical Realities. What type of resources does it take to get into this type of business where you own it? Do you make your own technology, or I don't even know how that would work. Like, what's the business side of it? Do you outsource where somebody else makes the technology and then you buy it from them?
Yeah, basically, there are some key elements that you buy in. For instance, there are two companies, one called Unity and one called Unreal Engine, which really sort of help you create worlds in 3 dimensions. And those two companies are way ahead of anybody else in those fields. So we would actually use either Unity or Unreal Engine to actually help us create our simulations. By and large, we like to do as much as we can in-house, but in this day and age, we do outsource as well, because sometimes it's a sort of that you don't have to be in the same building or the same office or the same building or the same town or even the same country, in actual fact, to collaborate with people that are fantastic at doing specific things. And working in augmented reality and virtual reality, you need a whole combination of people with different skill sets, and that's really from our point of view, it's people from a filming background, but it's people also from an app background, it's people from an animation background, it's people from coding background. So you need an awful lot of different skill sets within inside your company to actually sort of make it work properly.
Yeah. One of the things I was thinking about is yesterday Elon Musk launched Inspiration 4, the 4 astronauts that went up in space. I think I saw a picture of them using headsets for their training. So you could definitely help astronauts. Now, I'm not going to keep you too much longer. We covered a little bit about what to expect in the future. How long before virtual reality is a part of our everyday lives, if it's not already?
That's a very good question, and it's something that, with a lot of technology, you don't really know exactly when it sort of breaks through into what I call the mainstream. Um, I've seen a big sort of movement in the last really 18 months or so, and that's probably partly because of COVID. Because if people are sort of isolated or stuck in one place and they can't travel or even can't get out of their house or their apartment, you can actually sort of get out of your house or your apartment
Right.
virtually. So things like that help. Obviously, the sort of, as I said, sort of the technology sort of gaining a pace helps. And I think that I mentioned Palmer Luckey, who invented the original Oculus. Now, he got bought out by Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook.
Facebook, yeah.
And they paid Palmer $2.3 billion for his company. And I believe at the time, Palmer was still not 24 years old. So so he made an awful lot of money in that area. But I have to say that that Mark Zuckerberg has in actual fact embraced the virtual reality technology, and because of the vast resources of Facebook, has been able to push it forward. And it's really sort of how quickly companies like Facebook or Apple or Google actually want to sort of get on board and help push this forward. That will be the sort of main reason about why something's adopted. I've seen in the last year though that sort of I think Facebook have now broken through the barrier of getting more headsets to more people, because it's a bit like everybody thinks that mobile phones sort of came. One day there wasn't any mobile phones, and the next day there was. In actual fact, it was quite a long period of time.
It was an overnight thing.
Yeah, and so the sort of looking back at it, you think it was overnight, but and that's right, it took an awful lot longer. So I hate to sort of like try and be too specific about how long these things will take, but I will say that I think within the next 10 years, everybody will be using augmented reality and virtual reality in some form or other, and they won't even realize that they're doing it. It won't be a sort of barrier, or that seems like something that's in the future, or I don't understand. It will just become something that people will use because that's the best way to do something, whether that's communicating, whether that's in a social environment, whether that's gaming, or whether that's training, or whether that's education.
Here's something I just thought of. Self-driving technology. Is that the same type of technology that's used in VR? And I don't know in what aspect, maybe like spacing or just recognizing different things. Because one of the things, the Oculus Quest 2, it switches to a where you could see things, but it has cameras on the outside of it. So it's almost like you could see through the headset. And I was thinking that's got to be like the same technology that self-driving cars have.
Yeah, absolutely, very much so. And in actual fact, the new headsets that come out will have more and more cameras and more sensors to be more sensitive to that. And as I said, that we've been talking about augmented reality and virtual reality, and they're two separate things at the moment. In the future, they're going to become much more blended, and there will be headsets that, in actual fact, are not just virtual reality or not just augmented reality. They'll be able to do both. And they might use different techniques to do that, but you're absolutely right. The sort of the sort of self-driving sort of idea, because also the great thing about the Quest, it's what we call outside in. So in actual fact, the actual headset itself, it is way smarter than you really think it is. It's got a huge amount of stuff happening there, a huge amount of stuff going on, and that as technology gets smarter, smaller, faster, is going to help what we're doing in those areas.
Yeah, there's a lot to look forward to. Now, before I go ahead and wrap this up, I got to ask you, understanding how augmented reality works, VR works, has it made you question reality at all? Like, I listen to a lot of Joe Rogan, Elon Musk. They have this idea on the simulation theory. And I got to be honest with you, it's not as far-fetched as one might think, especially when you start getting into virtual reality.
Absolutely, and I think you could also sort of add the matrix into that sort of mix as well, because and the lines will certainly get blurred. And in actual fact, I was reading quite an interesting sort of paper just in the last week about sort of saying, how realistic should we make virtual reality?
Yeah.
Because if you make it super realistic, so that it's actually indistinguishable from what you're seeing in real life, therefore it will become impossible to tell whether you're in virtual reality or whether you're in
Right.
real life. So it's really going to sort of blur the lines there. And I think we have to sort of be quite sort of careful about how we approach this. I've talked a little bit about how helpful virtual reality is in training and education, but it's also helpful in sort of mental health problems like post-traumatic stress and phobias and things like that, helping people get over those. Now, those are the positive aspects, but of course, if I can help people get over positive, problems that they have in that area, I could probably also create the world's scariest horror game or horror movie, where it would become almost indistinguishable about, am I really living this horror nightmare? Is it a nightmare? Is it reality? Or is it virtual reality?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think we got to be careful because it's going to be at some point the even if it's, let's say, 1,000 years down the road,
Yeah.
at some point it has to become indistinguishable from reality, right?
Yes, exactly. And one of the interesting things that I've seen hypothesized is, in actual fact, that if you take this technology far enough, and let's say that there are aliens living somewhere else in the universe, it's quite possible that they've created technology like this. In actual fact, why would a person or an alien actually have to travel from A to B themselves?
Right.
That they could send a sensor to, in actual fact, capture what's going on, but they could be feeling everything that's going on in virtual reality, literally hundreds of millions of light years away.
Yeah.
So in actual fact, in the future, you actually might not have sort of space migration or anything like that. In actual fact, that might be all done virtually, because do I really it means that I could actually really sort of, as a scientist, sort of go to the and exist virtually on the surface of Venus, for instance, which would be
Yeah.
impossible for me to do in real life at the moment. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, and I think there's always I'm pretty sure, and I hope that we don't head up into sort of a dystopian way of sort of Ready Player One, where people are just using sort of virtual reality or augmented reality as a way of escaping from their real reality,
Reality,
and they start doing it more and more. No, I think it always has to be sort of sort of balanced out. On the one hand, I find it very exciting about what could happen in the future, but I have just a little bit of twinge of sort of, oh, we have to be careful about this to make sure we're doing the right way. And yes, and Elon Musk and other people have talked about the possibility of us living in a reality that's we think it's real, but it's not
right.
real. Because in actual fact, the more I've worked with virtual reality and augmented reality, the more I've understood about what we see through the eyes trumps everything else. So in actual fact, it means that I can actually make it so that people will believe what they want to believe, and they'll believe what they see. So it's on the one hand, that's exciting. On the other hand, it's a little bit scary. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve, thank you so much for joining the Conley Show. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this episode. Until next time, stay curious.